Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. I am Sarah Falvo, the Managing Director of Arcview Business Management Consulting. And today we are here to chat about the most recent Vape Report workshop with Greentank Technologies and Headset. So a little bit about Arcview before we start. The Arcview Group is an event management and financial services firm that leverages its thought leadership and its services to facilitate growth in the cannabis, psychedelics, and industrial hemp industries. We are committed to the social mission, regulatory evolution, as well as the economic growth of these industries. We have a number of business units within the Arcview ecosystem, including Arcview Ventures, which is our principal investing group and operator of the Arcview Collective Fund, which is a member-managed venture capital fund with 78 active limited partner members. It's a committed capital fund, but unique in that its members make the decisions. We also have Arcview Consulting, which I'm a part of, which is our division that helps guide companies through various services such as growth strategy, state expansion, license applications, business plans and pitch materials, as well as M&A assistance, both on the buyer and seller sides. And additionally, we have Arcview Capital, which is our FINRA registered broker-dealer, which provides investment banking services and is soon launching their crowdfunding offering. And most recently, we announced Arcview Events and Experiences, which is our joint venture with McVeigh Global Meeting and Events to relaunch and create scale for our in-person event business. They will also manage our digital programming, and they will be operating our Women's Inclusion Network, which provides a platform for women in the industry to network, collaborate, and support each other's participation in these industries. Now, let's get on with the program. So although the effects of the pandemic are still lingering, it remains clear that the cannabis industry as a whole is continuing to grow at a rapid clip. Over the last couple of years, we've seen shifts in consumer preferences, business pivots from multiple companies, as well as more and more states coming online. But today, we're going to do a deep dive into some of the information specifically surrounding the vape category and vertical. The data that we'll be chatting about comes from the Year in Review report compiled by Greentank Technologies and backed by data provided by Headset. As we all know in this industry, data is queen. So I am thrilled to have the following panelists join me in this conversation. So we have Derek Shampoo, VP of Brand and Marketing at Greentank Technologies, Elizabeth Bell, Director of US Sales at Greentank, and Jocelyn Sheltraw, Director of Strategy at Headset. So welcome, everyone. So happy to have you on this conversation. Love for you to turn on your cameras and unmute yourself and come on screen. So welcome, welcome. So I'd love to have everybody just kind of give a little bit of background about what you're doing in the space and about your company. So Derek, let's start with you.
Yeah, sure. Great to be here. My name is Derek. I'm the Vice President of Brand and Marketing here at Greentank Technologies, where we design, engineer, manufacture top-tier vape hardware, including cartridges, disposables, and batteries for producers all over North America. But really happy to be here.
Fantastic. And Elizabeth, how about you?
Hi, piggybacking on Derek. I also work for Greentank Technologies. And right now I am working as the Director of Sales for the US, concentrating on expanding our footprint in the US, and really excited to join you guys for the workshop today.
Fantastic. And Jocelyn, I know you're having some issues. We're trying to help you from the back end to get your beautiful face on there. But in the meantime, tell us a little bit about what you're doing at Headset and what Headset is all about.
Okay.
And there you are.
There we go. We made it. Hi, everyone. What's happening? Jocelyn, been a part of the cannabis industry for 4 years now with Headset the entire time. I do a lot of things at Headset, mostly just talking about what we do at Headset, sharing a lot of the learnings. Was really excited to partner on this vape report because, as we all know, we're participating here today because, wow, there's a lot going on in the vape market. And so, yeah, so for anyone who's not familiar with what we do, and as we go through the data, Headset is a cannabis data and analytics company. We're really a software company at our core. And so what we do is we provide a piece of software for dispensaries that they use to better understand their point of sale data And then what we do on the back end is we're aggregating all of that data in real time. And then once we have a substantially large enough size of data, meaning that we're seeing somewhere around 20 to 30% of transactions in any state or province, that gives us enough data to go and forecast that up for the entire market. So as we're going through this report, we're looking just at 2021, but all of the data, I'm going to reference some of what we're seeing in real time, because having access to all that point of sale data in real time is obviously incredibly powerful insights. And so I want to share as much of the up-to-date information as possible.
Fantastic. And so before we actually dive into the data, Derek, I'd love for you to give just a little background as to how and why these reports have come to fruition, and why are they important in general?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. We've back in end of 2020 into the beginning of 2021, we've taken a really heavy analytical decision-making approach to our business. And not only does that apply to what we do internally at Greentank and how it shifts or changes the trends in how we develop product, but it's also been a very, very powerful tool for us to provide to our potential clients or our existing clients on showcasing what trends we're seeing inside of their backyard, and so we can better arm them to either stay on top of those trends or get in front of them before their competition and gain more market share. And so partnering up with fantastic partners like Arcview and Headset has been fantastic over the last year and a half, and we've been more than happy to put together these reports for like I said, not only internally but for externally as well.
That's great. And Jocelyn, can you give a kind of overview of the types of data that has been collected? Is it more on the consumer side? Is it more on the sales side? What does that look like?
Yeah. Okay. So as I was mentioning, so everything from Headset's end, it's all coming from the point of sale system. So when a point of sale system is also pulling in their customer data, maybe they're using a Spring Big or a Sprout platform, obviously the dispensary wants to understand, who is my customer? What are they purchasing? How do I sell them more things, essentially, right? So any of the other technology platforms that a dispensary is using, and that data is then coming through the point of sale system, that is the data that Headset is providing. So this is all, again, like real time point of sale data. Right now throughout North America, I think the latest numbers that I heard was that there's 70 different point of sale systems. We're obviously going to see a lot of consolidation. I think we can all agree we don't need 70 point of sale systems as an industry. As we mature, we'll start to see, that there's a handful that are going to be used. And so we've partnered directly through an API connection with 27 of them. And that's the majority of the market is using one of those 27. And so that's all the data that is coming through. It is that point of sale data. It's not consumer panel data, not consumer survey data. These are different data sets, very, very important data sets. But we're trying to answer the question of the who and the what, not necessarily the why. So a lot of, I think, what probably all of us are going to speak to, there's also our own anecdotal, what we're hearing in market perspectives. But we're really glad that we have at least the transaction data, exactly what's being sold through. I think that's a really powerful piece of the data that we're all looking for. So.
Absolutely. And Elizabeth, from your end, you handle sales. Why is data important to you? And why is this type of data important to you?
Sure. I mean, the data drives so much decision-making, as it should, but part of what I do, especially for Greentank, is to marry the data with the emotion of what's going on in the marketplace. And there's a lot of that and a lot of up and down that's driving kind of a lot of buying decisions overall. I mean, we see it on the legislative end, we see it on the social equity fight. So really what it takes is taking this data that kind of cuts through all the narrative of what's going on in the cannabis marketplace and really helps us define decisions and point our partners in the right direction so that they can maximize sales in the marketplace outside of all the drama and the narrative.
I love that. That was a great answer. And just a reminder to the audience, if you have any questions, we will have some time hopefully at the end to get to some of those. So if you do, drop them in the Q&A portion on the bottom of your screen rather than in the chat. It's hard to kind of follow those. So feel free to ask away. So let's open this up. So I know there's a lot of data in this report, and we'll have someone drop a link to it in the chat as well so people can access it. But a lot of it is about trends. So I would love to chat about, specific trends that we've seen over the last 12 months, just in terms of, different types of oils and things like that. So Derek or Jocelyn or Elizabeth, who would like to start?
It doesn't matter. I can, just kickstart.
Sure.
You had mentioned, trends on formulation. Something that we've definitely seen over the course of the last 12 to 16 months has been an increase in unique extract formulations. We're talking, rosin, live resin. Jocelyn, you'll have to chime in if you have exact numbers on this. But for instance, the California market, we're seeing upwards of 35% of all vape products are now live resin cartridges, which is, I think, $350 million worth of sales. You contrast that with the Canadian market, where I think we just started selling. I'm up in Toronto, so the market up here, in 2021, we just started to sell live resin products. And so, I think it's, low to, mid single digits up in Canada, but we're headed in that direction as well. I could easily see 2022 overall probably hitting, 15, 20, 25% in live resin or other unique extraction formulations. So in terms of formulations, I think we're only going to see either growth in live resin, rosin, et cetera, or some other unique formulation that someone comes up with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would just add to that. Yeah, we're absolutely seeing live resins become popular in all of the markets that we're tracking, aside from Derek, what you just mentioned, some of the markets that are the provinces in Canada. And it makes a lot of sense, right? When you think about a live resin product, this is a full spectrum product. So it's having all the cannabinoids, all the terpenes, all the flavonoids. This is different than a distillate, right? A distillate product strips all of that out. And so you're really getting Delta 9 in that. So I think it's a signal that people are really wanting to understand what's in their products. They're looking for something that is as natural to the plant as possible. And so we do see that across all markets. And I think it's also a signal that there's going to be a lot more opportunity for the craft cultivator, the craft connoisseur that's been working on some of these products to really showcase what's different about their particular product. And there's a lot more room, I think, for innovation when it comes to live resins than there are distillate product. So I think that's really exciting to see. We're expecting that's going to continue from Headset's end. And so, it'll be fun to watch brands kind of evolve and bring that marketing into their packaging and really storytelling.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Jocelyn, I agree. I think it's super exciting. For me personally, to watch, more mainstream markets catch on to something that used to feel much more connoisseur, especially through the medium of vape. I love it. And to watch these new formulations come about, we're also kind of seeing that tech needs to be more dialed in and elevated to service these elevated formulations that kind of, that more mainstream consumers are now asking for, which is very exciting, which means that they're more educated.
Yeah. And Jocelyn, you had brought up something, and the innovation in extraction formulation, which comes right back to the need for advancement in technological advances in the hardware as well. Gone are the days that it's one size fits all for this vape hardware. It's really difficult to go from what works for distillate doesn't necessarily work for full spectrum live resin.
And I'm sure as more and more states come online and more consumers are kind of educating themselves about different, options of products, there is going to continue to be just a spike in the need for, advancement for different products and things like that. So it's really exciting. And how do you at Greentank kind of keep on the cusp of all of that as well? Just with innovation and everything.
Yeah. We've taken a heavy approach in the investment in our people, especially on the product development side. Our chief technology officer, Dr. Peng, we have, world-class engineers, a multitude of, quality control, quality assurance folks that are working on these unique formulations. We have a Health Canada, federal Health Canada research and development license, and we have a full-blown lab up in our headquarters up in Toronto, where we can test the oil formulations and how they interact within different variations of hardware. Going back to the need to evolve from a hardware standpoint. You need to really dial in, the hardware specs to these ever-changing formulations that are coming out in the market, and we have a team that is dedicated to do that.
That's great. And so, is that hard? Because I know that as more innovation is coming and more advanced form factors and everything like that. At the same time, there is a race to the bottom pricing right now in terms of, I guess, all cannabis in general, but especially vapes and cartridges and things like that. And I think, I'm sure the consumers don't necessarily understand the cost to produce all of these different products. So how do you, as these companies, kind of manage, towing the line between both of those, not charging too much, but also, still needing to keep up with the times and produce these new innovative things?
Well, it is not easy.
That was a great answer, Elizabeth. Yes.
I mean, that's basically encapsulates it all. This is a constant struggle. And I feel like this is also a constant struggle of most industry. We are, of course, caught up in the supply chain drama that the entire world is caught up in. And that is one of our main challenges. Speaking to Greentank personally, as Derek has already mentioned, we are really throwing a lot of resources at getting the right people who are experts worldwide in all industries to kind of attack this unique situation that keeps us caught in this ever-changing nickel and diming just race to the bottom, as you mentioned. We can only do what we can. Of course, we're also dealing with legislative challenges and regulatory challenges that keep a lot of our partners on a shoestring budget. So, we try to attack what we can, but just to reiterate, it is not easy, and it's a constant back and forth with our partners to make sure that we are all on the right side of the numbers.
Great. Thank you.
Yeah. And I mean, look, the reality is we're a new industry, right? So anytime in a new industry, initially prices are going to be higher, things start to stabilize, and then prices are going to decrease as more competition, as more saturation comes in. A lot of people talk about this race to the bottom pricing. And I think what I see in market, I get hit up from a lot of brands that I'll say are on either the craft connoisseur side to the mid-size, and they're saying, hey, Joss, we can't compete with Raw Garden. We can't compete with STIIZY because we're not at a point of scale. And also I'll say, my partner is the co-founder of Guild Extracts. They're a specialty connoisseur vape and extract product. And they've run into this, right? And they're like, we just can't compete. We cannot get our prices low enough to be at a point of scale. And so they're now in this position where it's like, okay, either we charge what we need to charge and the consumer doesn't quite understand why you're going to pay significantly higher yet for those connoisseur products. This is all part of the education that's happening in a maturing industry right now. And so, a lot of these vape manufacturers will be in that position where they're going to, either have to get to that point of scale, work with a large scale contract manufacturing partner to really bring down their price points to go compete in the market. Or you got to go out with a heavy consumer education initiative and maybe partner with other craft producers, partner with other connoisseur vapes. And you go talk about, why is your product different when we're talking about live resin, right? You need to educate people on that. Talk about what makes your product so unique. I see a lot of brands that are still figuring out the storytelling piece. And I think a lot of people often don't remember how important that is in this new emerging industry. And the other thing I'll say about the price points is, we see this in a lot of markets right now, right? The cost of wholesale flower is the cheapest that it's ever been. And so a lot of producers are either in that position where if you're at that point of scale, then you want to have that market competitive advantage. So you're just going to decrease your prices because people buy on price point. So you try to get it as cheap as possible and then get that point of scale, take over market share. And so you have to be really strategic about what are you going to price your products? What category, what bucket are you playing in? Are you a value brand? Are you a premium brand? How are you going to tell that story? You have to think about all this. And I'm always surprised when I see that there's a lot of brands that aren't yet doing that. And it makes sense, right? Again, this industry is so new. There's a lot of people that are coming into these companies that are learning marketing as they go. And I think it's a signal to all of us in the industry just to really, have that you got to put the effort into that. You have to put the effort into the marketing of it if you're going to be that differentiated product that's not competing on price point.
That was such a valid point. And all the brands who are on this call today or watching this, you just got a golden lesson from Jocelyn. So that was great. Thank you. And Jocelyn, going right back to you. So before we really dive into the report, I know that you recently joined the board of the California Cannabis Industry Association, and you're seeing a lot of just policies coming through, across all verticals, but specifically for the vape sector, what are a couple things that you've heard about recently?
I'm sorry, I'm reading in the chat box and I got distracted.
Yeah, no worries.
Not the data. And so,
yes, don't worry. And we'll get to that stuff. So just some of the vape policies that you've seen from, or heard about from being on the CCIA board. So the age limits and things like that.
Okay, so this is kind of so obviously every market has different rules and regulations. Again, this being a new industry, this is all developing in real time. So in California, one of the things that we're seeing, the rise of disposable vape pens. So disposable vape pens, for a data point, generally making up around 10% of sales in each market is what we're seeing. And so one of the things that a lot of our policymakers are thinking about is they're recognizing, hey, sustainability. And it's not great for our environment, disposable vape pens. And so they're looking at some bills that are going to potentially, make that hard. Or not having disposable vape pens. Arizona is having some bills in place that are changing the legal age limit from, instead of 19 years of age on the medical market, moving that up to 21 years of age. So obviously a vape manufacturer is going to have to pivot their entire business in real time based on some of these regulations. And what we will see is that based on those regulations, we of course will then see the data or the trends in that market being reflected. And so that's something we need to look out for in California. We've seen vape bans, flavored vape bans in other markets. Oregon did that. Washington did that for a time period. Then we'll again start to see the data or consumer trends shift based off those regulations. So for us in California, that is something to think about, and that could be coming down the pipeline. So just be, sure to watch those regulations.
Perfect. And that's a great segue because we're going to dive into California now. And so for those who have not yet read the vape report, it breaks it down by different states, also Canada and US and different provinces in Canada. So it's very, granular in terms of specific locations and things like that. So for California in particular, I loved this quote too in the report that I had to say. So the California vape market was a runaway train in 2021, improving across the board on an already unprecedented and record-setting 2020. So let's chat about that. So Derek, why do you think that is?
Yeah, it's a good question. Obviously their brand has been growing year over year. They have an incredible proprietary pod system that they've introduced into the market, which is another conversation to be had because, typically in, across North America, the dominating SKUs are 510 universal cartridges or disposable units, in comparison to, say the e-cigarette or nicotine delivery system devices where, typically the whole market is proprietary pod systems like Juul or Vape, Views, Stealth. It just goes back to distribution, and STIIZY has done a fantastic job distributing their batteries wholesale to retailers. And so, if you make them available to retail environments, they're going to be successful. Not to mention that at scale, they can offer very, very competitive pricing, which in early markets is a big advantage.
Absolutely. And Jocelyn, you touched upon this before, that if you are not one of those larger brands, how do you compete as a craft producer?
Well, so I just want to provide some commentary on, so STIIZY is obviously the #1 brand in California. And I'll actually pull this up so people can kind of see what's going on with STIIZY in just a second. But I think STIIZY is a really great example. #1, they're vertically integrated, right? So STIIZY has 20 stores now throughout the state of California. And in California, we've got 850 open and operating stores at this point. I think many people who are based here are aware that only 1/3 of California actually allows cannabis retail at this point. So this is something, even though we voted in Prop 64, we're still waiting for a vast majority of the state to open up. So when you think about STIIZY and why their brand is exploding and doing so well, it's also because, they're vertically integrated. So they have their own retail stores, 20 retail stores. But I think more than that, they're a lifestyle brand. They've done such a good job. Los Angeles is the largest market in the world when it comes to cannabis. And you see that they've created this authentic lifestyle brand that is reflective of their consumer. And if you go on their website, you see that you want to be a part of this brand. People love this brand. I was on Reddit and I was looking and I was like, because why is STIIZY so popular? Not only do they have their proprietary devices, which we did an analysis, and I'll pop this in the chat box, where we see that when you have a proprietary device, you're going to see repeat purchase rates increase significantly. So plug and play is another one that has a proprietary device, not quite as popular as STIIZY, but that's a huge part of it. So when you're a vape manufacturer and you're thinking about, how do you create repeat retention rates? How do you create that brand loyalty? You need to be looking at all those aspects. Are you vertically integrated? Do you have solid relationships with those 850 retailers in California? Do you have that lifestyle brand? Are you communicating your story? I think those are the things that STIIZY is doing so well. Aside from what we're talking about with price point. Obviously, STIIZY has distillate products. They have live resin products. They're communicating different stories about those products. And because they're at a point of scale, they're able to charge cheaper than most other manufacturers in market. Also because they're owning that retail side and they're able to have all of the shelf space that they need. So they're just coming in with a punch because they're firing on all of those levels.
Absolutely. And then Elizabeth or Derek, what trends have you seen recently on the proprietary design front, and any differences between tobacco and cannabis?
Once again, kind of pointing back to something that Jocelyn has touched on, the closed system, pod system, proprietary design is certainly something that many people are looking at, experimenting with. And there's really been a spread in whether it's been successful or unsuccessful for each brand's launch. It is one of the most challenging SKUs, in my opinion, to launch into the marketplace because it's dual-headed. You have the proprietary battery and the pod. So it needs to be a very strategic launch. However, definitely see a lot of brands asking for this or playing around with this right now. And so I think that we're going to have some really strong growth in those categories over the next year.
Yeah, I agree. I think over the next 2 to 5 years, you're going to see a dominating shift into proprietary pod-based systems.
So interesting. And let's jump into Michigan now. So Michigan's data was very, very surprising. So let's chat about that a little bit. And Jocelyn or Derek, you want to hit off with that? All right. I love it. Thank you for screen sharing.
I'm going to screen share because I see people want to see the data. So let me roll with it.
Yep, absolutely. And just a reminder, the link for the report is in there. It is not confidential. So feel free to jump into that and read all of the data while Jocelyn is pulling this up. And then just really quickly, Derek, do you know off the top of your head in terms of the different states that were touched upon in the report? So I know there's California, Michigan, Colorado.
Oregon, Washington, I think you mentioned. And then up in Canada, we have BC, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Ontario. So I think in total, there was 10 key markets in North America.
Fantastic. And just, while she's still pulling that up really quickly, what are some main differences between Canada and the US in terms of just vapes and I guess consumer, preferences and things like that?
Yeah, I think the consumer preferences are generally the same. Sorry, my dog in the background. Are generally the same. You just see, trends starting at different times, and you can kind of see that in the U.S. as well, between East Coast and West Coast. I think we can all agree that typically what comes out of California or the West Side market is typically what you'll probably see, on the East Coast, maybe up into Canada, 3 to 6 months later. And so, typically, consumer behavior is very similar. Just depends on when trends start.
Absolutely. And so in terms, going back to Michigan, so while she's still pulling that up, and I appreciate it, Jocelyn, the largest jump in sales across the US was in Michigan, with an 80% increase from the previous year. So Elizabeth, do you have any thoughts on that? Why would it be so high?
Well, there's many factors. And, I know that we've all kind of individually pulled this apart because Michigan is a very exciting state. I can bring you guys a little bit of anecdotal evidence. We're hearing that people from the surrounding states, because Michigan has kind of had that jump start on creating their market, everybody's driving in and consuming. So they're getting a lot of, especially over the last year when there's been so many travel restrictions, driving a few hours to pick up what you need in a more developed market is very, very attractive. So we are hearing a lot of that, which is driving massive sales. So we'll see as the other states and their markets come online and or develop how that plays out. I know I've heard great insight from both Jocelyn and Derek about this state as well. So I'm excited to hear them share, because I know I was inspired when I heard them pull this state apart.
Absolutely. Derek, you want to jump in?
Yeah, just quickly on the Michigan side, like you said, the biggest jump in sales that we saw across any US market, part of that being, you got to look at the data and, understand where that data was being pulled from. The Michigan market, I believe, came online late 2019. And so, I figured 2020 is kind of this, vetting process across the board. There's a lot of infrastructure on the retail side that needs to be built out. Consumers are getting to, learn and understand, different cannabis products. You're getting folks who may have never tried cannabis products before now, being consumers, folks coming over from the gray market. And so you take the 2020 data and, that's kind of like your learning period. And then you extrapolate that over into the 2021 data where you're getting a huge increase in sales. I think that market just got a lot more comfortable around cannabis rec. It's the exact same thing that we saw up here in Canada, where the first year in vape sales was, a learning period. And then the year after was an absolute boom. And we're seeing, exponential growth. So we're seeing very, similar parallels from, the Michigan market into Canadian market and really any, new emerging market.
Great. And Jocelyn, do you have the California page?
I've got California. I see these comments going on, so let's get into the data. There's nothing that makes me more happy than this. Okay, so we're going on script here. All right, so what we're looking at here, so this is our headset. This is our platform insights. This is all the real-time market data. Again, this is point of sale data. And so this is all in real time, which is why we see this major drop off. So let's walk through some of this and what's going on. So we're going to look just at California. I know we're talking about Michigan now. I'll get there in a second, but I just want to touch on this because I went through and I see a lot of participants are here in California. So what we're seeing is the vape market is the second largest market in terms of category sales, right? This is 1.3 billion. Last year, out of our 5+ billion in sales, the vape market made up 1.2 billion. So what I want to call out here is what I find really interesting. So obviously through the pandemic, we've seen a lot of shifts in what people are purchasing and what was happening around last summer. So in June, what we started to see is cannabis sales started to decrease in most markets. And when we think back to what was happening last June, right, the world was just starting to open up again. People were going out for the first time. Summer was happening. People weren't getting stimulus checks. So what we saw in other industries as well is that there started to be a drop in sales in leisure industries. So a leisure industry is DIY industries, subscription services like Netflix, even some alcohol industries started to see declines in sales. People weren't doing these leisure activities as much. Cannabis was no different. So we started to see the same thing in cannabis. But what I find interesting, because every category will be a little bit different. Now, the vape category is one that didn't experience as much of those declines. And so you can see that here. So what we're looking at in this light blue is going to be the category sales, and in this dark blue is the market share. Now, if I were to pull up the flower category, for example, which I can do in a moment here, you're going to see that both the market share and the sales are declining in the flower category. Whereas I think it's a signal in the vape category that that's not what's happening. People are clearly very interested in purchasing vapes. And one of the things that we just did this analysis, the consumer demographic report, which I'll also pop into the chat link. A lot of this, I think, is attributable to Gen Z. So Gen Z is people that are turning 21 years of age every day. These are people born 1997 and thereafter. And just in the last year period, we've seen this age group double in size. And so their market share doubled in a year, right? And that makes sense. They're aging into the market every day. And they over-index in vape pens. The one of their largest category sales outside of flower. So flower, about 35% of Gen Z sales will go to flower. About 33% will go to the vape market. So I think that makes a lot of sense when we're seeing some other categories seeing some declines, and that didn't happen in the vape category, which is very interesting to me. Okay, now the other thing I'll point out, when we think about segments, okay, so a segment in a vape, how our taxonomy would be all-in-one disposables, rechargeables, cartridges, and e-juices. So what we can see in the market is that cartridges, clearly the dominant segment in the market. And then you'd see those all-in-one disposables, I mentioned earlier, somewhere around 10% in each market is what disposables will make up. Now we talked about pricing, okay? So this is gonna be the average EQ pricing. And so we can see, and this is common of all of the categories that we've seen, you're gonna see there's decrease in prices. So since March of 2021, the average EQ price around $45. And then now when we look up to date in March of 2022, about $39. So that's a pretty significant price drop there. The other thing that I want to call out, and this is touched on a great deal in the Greentank report, was just the rise of the 1 gram package size. And this was a shift through the pandemic. When we think about the start of the pandemic, half gram sizes really dominated the market. And now we see in this rather short period of time, right? I mentioned June. That's right around here. This is where you can start to see, the 1 gram sizes continue to take market share. So when we're looking at market share here, we can look going from 59% to 66%. We're talking about a matter of months, right? So to me, this data is signaling you have to keep afloat of these trends. It's obviously very costly to your business to pivot and go from a half gram to 1 gram, especially in the pandemic, whereas, Elizabeth was mentioning that just getting goods from China, getting all of these packaging materials is very hard to go pivot your business, but it's clear that consumers are showing they don't want to make as many trips into the store, so they're purchasing larger sizes instead. Okay, so what we're looking at here now, this is a product landscape, okay? So this is a heat map style chart. And so when we're looking at cartridges, we can see that those 1 gram cartridges in California, okay? This is our largest section here. 1 gram cartridges are making up 62.3% of our overall sales over this time period, which is this last 365 days. So this is clearly where the market is being dominated. Here we go. For anyone interested in who these top brands are, right? We talked about STIIZY. We can see it right here, right? STIIZY's killing it in terms of market share. So, by a long shot. So what, 281 million over that time period. This next brand would be Raw Garden. I saw that there was a comment in there in the chat box about Raw Garden and price point, I think, or why is the product not as popular as STIIZY? I'll refer back to that question, but you can see the difference in these brands, right? Heavy hitters, Select, Buddies, Plug and Play. So this hopefully will feel free to screenshot. This hopefully will give some people an understanding of who these top brands are. And so these top brands are making up, I think, 45%, the top 3 brands of the overall sales. So it's massive what they're making up. If we think about other industries, think about the wine industry. So, and this is a common question, and the reason I'm focusing on California is a lot of people will wonder, the wine industry in California, it makes up 90% of our overall wine sales in the United States are coming from California wines, which is crazy to think about. So a lot of people will come to us and ask, and they're saying, hey, like, how can we compete if these top brands are making up the majority of the market share? Is that comparative to other industries? And you know that a lot of this is comparative to other industries. You see wine, you see beer, you see bevel, you'll see a handful of those top brands are making up the majority of the market share. Now, that doesn't mean you're not going to have an opportunity to compete, but that's why we have craft beer industries. That's why we have connoisseur wines. You still have opportunities to compete, and you just have to figure out where your place is going to be within that market and how you're going to go communicate your branding. But in any market, we have to just remember, like, cannabis is so new. And so what's happening right now, I think it's people are buying on the masses because of unknowns. And it's going to take some time for consumer education to educate people, for it to come back around, for people to have more appreciation for connoisseur products. So what's happening today doesn't mean this is going to be happening tomorrow. If I were to have looked at this data from a year ago, these brands would be some of these would not be in the top 10. So a lot of this is changing. So I just don't want any of this to discourage people. A lot of people will say, well, how am I going to compete in this? And just don't be discouraged. Just find your place and figure out how you're going to compete in this. Okay, and then lastly, again, so you can see kind of like these are the top 50 products, so not the top 50 brands, but just in these top 50 products, you can see, look, check, STIIZY is making up the majority of those, right? The top 13 SKUs are all going to STIIZY. You've got some heavy hitters in there. You've got plug and play, again, proprietary device for plug and play. ABX, right? CannaCraft. This is a great story for people to understand about how quickly things will change. CannaCraft, absolutely a leader with ABX in the space. I think just a year or two ago, they were occupying a lot of these top 10 product SKUs. So this is how quickly things will change. So hopefully this gives people some good understanding of kind of what we're seeing here. I can pull up and check out, let's see, Michigan. Let's check that out. How is this going? This
is great. And I appreciate you kind of giving us a peek under the kimono as well. You did not need to pull up your proprietary back end, but we really appreciate it very much.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So let's check out and see what's going on in Michigan. Michigan is a really interesting market to me. I was out there for the Lemon Haze golf tournament last year, and Michigan has a really strong cannabis community. It's had a strong existing cannabis culture for a while. But one of the things that I think was interesting from the Greentank report is that a year ago, there was 60 plus different vape manufacturers, different brands that were in market in Michigan, and now it's 24. I don't know if anyone has any thoughts on that they want to pop into the chat box, but that's quite a big depression in terms of brands and market. I found that really interesting from the data. But regardless, all right, so here's what's happening in Michigan. A little bit different in terms of sales, right? We saw in California, a little bit more stagnant in terms of their sales growth. Michigan being a newer market, they came online in December of 2019. So we're certainly going to see some different trends there. You saw in California that the vape market was making up more share in terms of overall sales. That was closer to 25%. So Michigan, still the number 2 largest category of sales, but pushing just towards 21% of sales. So some similar trends that we'll see, right? So we'll see obviously the cartridges, that's going to be that dominant market share. Now, when we're looking at the all-in-one disposals, significantly smaller than what we saw in California. And I suspect that's probably just because more producer, newer market. So you're going to see this probably take off in another year's time, but you'll see that make up a little bit less sales there. Pricing. Okay. So this has been interesting also from the report. We see the downward shift in pricing in Michigan has been significantly more of a drop than we saw in California. So going from a $39, about $40 average EQ pricing here, all the way to $27.44. So that's a pretty significant drop in pricing. Derek, I don't know if you have any conjecture or kind of thoughts on what happened in pricing from that report.
No, not anecdotally. I just think as the market matured, they started understanding what what consumers were being attracted to, and more competition. Although, what you're telling us is less brands, but maybe just a better understanding of their overall audience.
Yeah.
I think that the less brands and the drop in prices does say a little bit of the story as the marketplace does develop, the competition heats up, and maybe certain business models aren't surviving. We do have to dig into that one more. I think it's really interesting too.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so as I'm looking at Michigan here in real time, so check out the package sizing. So again, like we saw in California, there's a little bit more difference in package sizing in California, but check out 1 grams in Michigan. Like this is crazy. 88% of sales are going to 1 gram package sizes. And what I suspect here is because Michigan again came online, or when adult use, December of 2019, we were already in the swing of things. Pandemic hit, just a month later. So they probably already moved quickly into the 1 grams as opposed to half grams, already noticing that difference. But I mean, it's pretty astounding, right? To see like, look how much that drop has happened so quickly. Like that's a pretty significant drop.
Yeah, like sorry, Jocelyn. Yeah, when we're talking about new markets like Michigan, you typically see new markets start off with half grams and disposable units. And what we're seeing out of the headset data is literally the exact opposite, where it's dominated by cartridges and 1 grams. So it's a really, really interesting market to try to understand what's going on there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then, okay, so remember I mentioned, so in the prior California we're looking at was closer to, I think that was 62% of sales is going to those 1 gram cartridges. Look at Michigan, about 82% of their sales are going to 1 gram cartridges. The next would be the half gram at about 14% of their sales. Again, feel free to screenshot any of this, or hit me up if anyone wants to kind of go through any of this in more detail. But okay, so yeah, I mean, all right. So when we're looking at their top brands, this looked pretty comparative, right? We saw STIIZY made up the significant market share, and we're seeing Platinum Vapes for the Michigan market. Okay, so over on the right, we see their total sales, 76 million, followed by Drit Michigan, Select, and then here we see STIIZY. They're rocking and rolling in several different markets, Michigan being one of them. And so that's interesting to see there. And then when we look at, let's see, their top product SKUs in Michigan. So yeah, a little bit more diversity in top product SKUs. So Drip clearly is taking those top 6 spots. Double Bear. Let's see, what's Double Bear doing here? So yeah, I don't know off the top of my head doing all this math in real time, but it looks like there's a little bit more diversity of players or manufacturers in the Michigan market. Maybe let me show as an interesting comparison point. Can we just go off script and talk Nevada? Absolutely. Because Nevada, I think, was super interesting to look at. So Nevada just being, obviously, Nevada, when the pandemic hit, we saw cannabis sales really start to decline in Nevada. And why is that? Obviously, that makes so much sense. People aren't traveling to Las Vegas, where in Las Vegas, 80% of the sales in Nevada were coming from Clark County. Okay, so that's obviously where Las Vegas is based. And so Nevada was one of the outlier markets when we were looking at the data, because the half gram sizes are still very popular in Nevada. And that makes sense. People are traveling. They don't want to get a 1 gram cartridge. They want to get something smaller that they're going to just be able to leave there and not fly back home with. The other thing about Nevada is that they had this other package size, which we see virtually non-existent in any other market, which is this 0.8 gram. Truly no other market we were seeing. And in Nevada, we do see it making up a fair amount of their sales, which is this, non-existent in other markets. So that's something to call out here. But I'm so happy to see this chart turn around, because if we would have looked back from early 2020 and through that year, Nevada was having a decrease in sales because of that tourist effect. And so now when we look at it, okay, the category sales in light blue here, and then the market share in dark blue. So we're seeing market share for vape pens increase in Nevada. Again, I think it makes sense. Younger people have more heavily skewed towards the vape market. So I think that makes a lot of sense for travelers there. Another interesting thing, so remember when we were looking at California and Michigan for all-in-one disposable sales, and that was more on that, 10% or less of sales? Check out Nevada. What this is signaling to me is that every state, every province is really going to have its own differences. There's going to be nuances to it. And so we can see that clearly reflected in the data. These all-in-one disposables, much, much more market share than you would see. Again, makes a lot of sense, why it's important to kind of understand what's going on in your market. And then let's see. Yeah, check this out. Look at the half grams. Look at half grams. Like, remember those other, like, this massive difference. Look at the 1 grams in Nevada, 7%, whereas every other market was in the 80%. Like, that is a huge, huge difference. And so when we look at here, yeah, the half gram cartridges, about 55%. Okay, followed by the all-in-one disposables, 0.3 grams. So interesting, very, very interesting. So let's look at STIIZY. STIIZY's killing it. All right, so, and look at this. So a little bit more diversity of those top brands in Nevada. Okay, so STIIZY, Select, Air Pro, Rove. So they're kind of competing a little bit more neck and neck. So a lot more product diversity, that brand diversity that we're seeing happening in Nevada. And then you'll see that here in the top 50 SKUs. So that is interesting to me when I'm looking at this.
Absolutely.
Let's see.
And we have a number of questions from the audience. So I don't know if you want to share one more data point, and then we'll jump right into those.
Yeah, no, I think I'm going to stop kind of sharing. That's perfect. From there.
Thank you, Jocelyn. That was really, really helpful. So like I said, there's a number of questions, so we're going to jump into it. And, since we were talking about STIIZY so much, someone asked, if live resin is becoming so popular, why is Raw Garden losing so much share in California to STIIZY? I don't know if anyone wants to tackle that.
So I think there's a couple ways to look at it. And this is just all opinion, but from what I'm seeing, I think that there's a couple differentiators. Branding, also boots on the ground activation in the retail areas. So brand presence and innovation. And I'm sure that Raw Garden is seeing this and trying to do something internally. They're also a great company trying to do something internally to gain back some of that market share. But to me, there is going to be some of this going on as this industry develops, particularly in California. And those are two differentiating factors that I'm kind of seeing between the two businesses.
Absolutely. Thank you. And then this is for the Greentank team. What type of adjustments to the device are necessary to accommodate the difference in viscosity between distillate and rosin?
Yeah, it's a fantastic question. It depends on your formulation, which is why we have a team who helps work with you and your formulation team. But a couple big factors are intake hole sizes and the absorption rate that it happens inside of the heating core. You don't want that to oversaturate. You want to have the perfect absorption rate and flow through rate of your hardware, and then resistance, I would say, on the cartridge side. Another thing to consider is voltage output from your power source. Thinking about what battery sources you're using and not overheating your resin or rosin formulations is going to go a long way on getting the most out of that experience.
And that is why so many brands find that closed system SKU so attractive, because they are able to dial in their battery to their actual pod. When you're working with cartridges, you have to think of kind of that standardized 510 battery, which can really vary. So that's kind of a big difference between approach and those SKUs.
Perfect. And you actually kind of answered one of the other questions. So someone wrote, you can have amazing cartridges and amazing live resin, but dispensaries are pushing cheap batteries, which deliver inconsistent experience at best. How can hardware manufacturers, processors, and dispensaries work together to deliver the best customer experience? I think you kind of, put it succinctly with that.
And it's an educational bit too, right? Like understanding, the power outputs from these power devices. It's going to take a lot of education on all fronts, from manufacturer to retail to the consumer.
Absolutely. And then the next question is, are there still data blind spots in the market, whether with consumer trends, retail sales velocity, inventory levels, et cetera? If so, what data is still sorely missing?
Yeah, I can take this. So yeah, I mean, listen, this is all new for a lot of us, right? It's like, if you look at the companies, the data companies that are out there, Headset's been around since 2015. You see BDSA around the same time, New Frontier, obviously what you guys are doing at Arcview, Brightfield, all of this is relatively new, right? Then you have the consumer survey groups, you have the survey panels, like people like Laura Albers, with Oasis Intelligence, and she's going out and doing these large scale consumer survey panel data. You see a lot of these companies that are developing in real time, and new companies coming in. So of course, there's going to be blind spots. No data set is perfect at this point, and you'll see players focusing on different questions. That's why in the beginning, I'm saying at Headset, we're focused on answering the who and the what are they buying. Then you're going to have the other companies that are focused on the why. And that's a very important question. And I think we're starting to see a lot of that data start to evolve. I think some of the evolution that needs to happen in that, in answering the why questions, so that survey and the panel data, it's having large scale survey and panel data. That's having the Nielsen's, the IRIs come in that are doing these massive, like, million person surveys. That stuff we're all waiting for, right? And those companies will start to come in as it's a federally legalized industry. Many of them don't want to touch cannabis yet, as we know. And so there's data there, but there's even data on the cultivation side, right? You've got trim, you've got distro. There is so many different data sets that are being developed. I think a lot of people are looking for a cohesive data set that's pulling all of those different data points together. The delivery data, like what Ease is seeing, or Grassdoor, or Hyperwolf. There's still so much of these companies that we need to kind of pull it all together to consolidate it. And I'm looking forward to seeing more of that happen.
Absolutely. And then Derek and Elizabeth, what does vape safety mean to you?
Yeah, it's critical, especially what we've gone through over the last 2 or 3 years. Starting with heavy metals, and that stems from poor bill of material. So it's super important to work with a reputable manufacturer who has a clean supply chain and ISO and GMP standard factories who can produce and actually manufacture safety. The other bit into it goes into, we had the whole vape gate or vape scare with Avali, which was making folks sick. Unfortunately, that came from the black market and, unregulated additives that were being added into vape cartridges. So it kind of encapsulates everything from, the hardware manufacturer standpoint, making sure that you're working with reputable, brands and producers of oil. I think some of the regulations that are coming down are a really positive thing. Right now we work with a lot of reputable brands who heavy metal test our brand's oils inside of our hardware. But the next step of that is testing the aerosol that's actually coming out from the heating core, which just takes things to the next level. So consumer safety is above and beyond anything, our core mission. And it should be across the industry.
Yes, vape safety is basically a foundational pillar of what will hold the future of this industry. We're seeing it in Gen Z, a coveted demographic. They prefer vape. Vape is growing and pulling market share. And safety and confidence is what's going to drive the consumers to buy. So we have to make sure that we keep it safe across the board as well, not just in vape, flower as well.
Absolutely. And Jocelyn, thank you for pulling up that
I'm
chart.
pulling it up. Yeah, so you can see. So
in real time, I love it.
32, just over 31% of sales is going to be going to, this is Gen Z right here. So you can see it's almost neck and neck with flower, right? So the younger the generation, the more propensity they have towards vape pens. The older the generation, the more you're going to see things like flower, pre-rolls, edibles really be attractive to those generations. And so I saw that there was a question in the chat box about will this continue? And I think absolutely, right? This is Gen Z. When we think of, right, nicotine and tobacco devices for Gen Z, like that's obviously been something that they've been very attracted to. And so it makes sense why they're going to be interested in vapes. So this number, again, remember, these people are turning 21 every day. So they're aging into the market. That's why we saw last year, Gen Z made up about 8% of the sales, and now it's 16%, right? So they're aging in. So of course, this is going to continue. I expect to see vape become incredibly important and overpower flower, which actually last summer, we saw that Gen Z women, for the first time ever, vape sales surpassed flower sales for Gen Z women. So that was an interesting,
that's interesting
note there. So I popped this into the chat box, by the way. This has a ton of different demographic data on all categories, but you can see how it's broken out by men and women, and there are different trends there.
That's fantastic. Well, we are at the top of the hour. So I just wanted to thank everybody, especially Derek and Elizabeth and Jocelyn, for your insights. A lot of on the fly conversation as well. Thank you, Jocelyn, for pulling up all that data. Just a reminder, you can find the vape report on Greentank's website, as well as in the chat. There's it's listed a few times, the link. And there will be a poll popping up shortly. So we appreciate your feedback on that. And just a reminder, these programs are made for people who are kind of curious, just dipping their toe into the industry, or who have been entrenched in the industry since the beginning. So we really try to have a balance of different things for different people, and we appreciate those who understand that. So with that said, I just wanted to thank everyone again, and we will see you soon on our next program. All right, thanks. Bye.